I'm cheering. And here I am.
Hi, Molly.
Hi, Molly.
How is everybody?
All right, good. All right, so far.
Great.
How are you?
I'm gonna give a so-so, if that is acceptable. Just been a stressful week at work, but you know, you just keep on keeping on, I guess. Ken, I know that this is being recorded because I want it on the record, but sorry that Nancy always beats me to responding to your emails, and she always says
Yeah,
it
that's
better than I would. So I'm like, he probably thinks I don't even read these, but I do, and then I'm like composing a response, and there Nancy goes with her effortless,
problem.
paragraphs of information. So, all right, are we good to go, Elisa?
Yes.
Okay.
I think Sarah said she was coming, but hasn't joined yet. But
Okay, so we have quorum, and it's fine. to
yeah,
proceed.
we've got quorum, so.
Great. All right, so I would like to call to order the Thursday's December 9th, 2021 City of Monona Sustainability Committee meeting at 6:32 in the P. Can we get a motion to approve the minutes from the November 11th meeting?
Also move.
Second.
Great. All in favor?
Hi.
Any corrections or issues that you'd like to address in the minutes?
I found just some little typos,
Yeah,
but I'll
Sure.
let you know about those.
and,
some other time. I didn't.
You found that probably.
Okay. All right, any opposed? All right. It does not appear that we have any appearances or unfinished business, so we'll move on to item number 6, the OEI grant application.
Yeah, so
Nice work.
Nancy and I tried to summarize. So Nancy, Ken, and I met with Brad to talk a little more in detail about potential projects for the grant application. And I think, like, first, we talked about lots of different possibilities, and I think none of them are exactly right for this round of grants. So I think there was lots that we can talk about, but just know that, like, this will all be starting in the next cycle of grant applications, not in like the next 2 months. So I think, let's see, I can start off first with the LED streetlights and just say they're not eligible as a grant project. The way that their definition of energy efficiency improvements has been written is that it has to be in a building or attached to a building, so streetlights don't count. So that's one thing. There are still some other options for streetlights that we can talk about a little later if we want. But then Brad came up with a couple of other ideas that could be good grant projects for future years. So one of those is related to the new public safety building. So planning and a feasibility study for that is starting in 2022. And we could do sort of a 2-year approach to this, where maybe in the first year, while we're doing a feasibility study and getting some of the architectural drawings done for that building, we could apply for an OEI grant for their planning money for designs to be created for the public safety building to be either LEED Platinum or net zero or some other standard that we decide we want to meet with the building. And then based on those designs that are drawn in the planning phase, we could then apply for an implementation grant the following year, or whenever the year is that the building is being built, to help cover the costs of whatever those additional, oh, there it goes. Whatever those additional costs are to get the building to whatever standard we want to meet. So that's the first one. I don't know if we want to talk about that now, if I should cover the other grant idea right now. I don't know.
Is the idea we're just not, we're gonna pass on this grant?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, there's nothing that, because the LED streetlights project
Yeah,
doesn't apply
yeah.
for for this grant, and these other projects that sort of make sense. There's, they're not ready yet. And like to match with the timeline that the city already has for these projects, it makes sense to wait until next year.
And there's not much time for this grant
Right,
either.
right. At this point, there's about a month until the grant grant applications are due for this round. But,
Sorry, Lisa.
no, go ahead.
As far as the scope of the conversation or the kind of the structure of the meeting, I would recommend, and I'm open to being flexible about this, but sort of doing a broader overview as you've outlined in the document, and then kind of maybe talking as a committee about which projects we feel we might want to prioritize, or kind of make a hierarchy of those that would make the most sense, or a timeline, at which we might want to address multiple projects. But I think going through it, giving the broad overview and then kind of digging in specifically might be a better, a good way to go through the meeting.
Okay, great.
One general question I
Yeah.
have related to that is how structured yet or not structured yet is the sequencing of the projects that we have in mind, and what are the factors that are impacting that?
Sure. So for the public safety building, so yeah, let's see if I can, Brad is the expert on all of this, and but my understanding is that the city has already budgeted money for the 2022, in the 2022 budget for a feasibility study for the public safety building, right? So there's already design work that will be starting. And so the idea is that we would apply, if we're going to pursue public safety building stuff, we would apply like starting at the end of next year for the 2023 grant cycle for the more of the design work for the building. And so that would happen over like the course of 2023. And then either in 2024 or maybe later, depending on how long design and actual, like getting to the actual construction phase takes, we would wait till like the 2024 cycle to then apply for the implementation part of the grant for the public safety building. So it's sort of,
Logical.
yeah, it's sort of like subsequent years. So that's the public safety building, and I can feel free to like jump in if there are details I'm missing.
I think you're doing a good job.
Yeah, so then the other project has to do with the public works garage. So essentially in 2023, let me go back to my own. I'm going to get
2020 is what it says here.
Yeah, so for 2023, the Public Works Garage is getting like new siding, extra insulation, a new roof, and some other building improvements, including hopefully putting in some charging for electric vehicles. So that's like the scope of the project right now. Again, to happen in 2023. As we're doing that, especially as we're replacing the roof, we will need to take the solar that is on the roof off. And so then we have an opportunity to replace it and maybe do some other cool stuff. So as it relates to the grant, we could apply after 2023 when all of the exterior and new roof is on. So probably for like 2024, we could apply for grant funding for new solar on the roof of the Public Works Garage, and potentially for like the EV charging and maybe battery storage at the Public Works Garage as well. So that could all be kind of like lumped into one project. And the way the grant is right now, like the solar itself would be sort of one piece, and We could ask for funding for that, and then the like energy efficiency stuff. So the battery storage and that would be sort of a separate thing, but it would all be happening at the same time. Yeah, so that's the Public Works Garage. And then, so I think those are the two contenders for,
now.
yeah, for now and for the, specifically for the OEI grant. As we were having this meeting, there were some other projects that came up that are cool, that like are possibilities as well. So I guess in relation to the Public Works Garage and replacing the roof, it would require replacing the solar, which brought up a whole conversation about our current solar panels on all of our buildings and what we want to do with them. So I think that will be, essentially we'll need to decide if we want to replace the solar that we have with panels that we own. Right now, we like lease, another company owns our solar panels, right? And we pay them for the electricity. So we could do something like that again when we replace our panels, or we could own our own array and we'd have to like contract with someone to do regular maintenance on those. But you know, if we're replacing the Public Works Garage solar, it also, you know, like the library's roof is going to need to be replaced relatively soon, which means we'll also have the opportunity to redo the library's solar, you know, and as we're doing that, you know, it starts, the more roofs we're replacing or the more solar that we're redoing, it just makes sense to talk about like what we want to do with the solar on our other buildings as well. So that's sort of the solar piece. And then just to circle back to streetlights, so they won't qualify for OEI grants. Brad clarified some things which like I did not realize, I don't think Nancy did either. So when we've talked about streetlights in the past, we've talked about how it makes sense to be on the MG&E maintenance schedule because that saves money in terms of labor costs. And that applies to all of the interior, like residential streets in Monona. What we have learned is that the streetlights along Monona Drive are owned by the city, not by MG&E. So we don't have to follow the same maintenance schedule that we do for all the residential streets. Additionally, part of the streetlights along Monona Drive are already LEDs. So there's only one section, and I don't remember which section it is, that still needs to be converted. So that's just another thing that the committee could think about pursuing, is like converting those streetlights. And then the other big corridor is Broadway. And Brad said that they're planning to do a big redo of Broadway, I think in like 2024, 2025. So that's a little bit further off, but that would also include replacing streetlights and converting them to LEDs.
I'm intrigued that we own the lights on Monona Drive. And they look good. And it just makes me wonder, how did that happen? And should we do that, more of that? Like, should we slowly own all our streetlights, you know, for example? Because otherwise I mean, I don't know, but it'd be interesting to hear what Brad has to say about it, I guess, to see if it even makes sense economically.
Yeah, I don't know if there's like a cost difference between, obviously we do like maintenance, or we're responsible for maintenance costs
Right.
on the ones that we own, but I don't know how that compares to like how much we pay to MG&E.
Yes.
Actually, behind the scenes for me.
Right,
Right, right.
and I know, I will just say now, like, having done all of the data analysis for the past couple of years, not all of the streetlights are metered in the same way.
Oh, okay.
The data is just, part of it is that I don't know all the details, but it's a lot messier to parse out the data for streetlights than it is for like a building that has its own electric meter.
Sure.
So,
I think traditionally, probably it made a lot of sense to have somebody else maintain streetlights. But, I mean, I've changed, in the last 3 houses I've lived in, I've changed all the light bulbs to LEDs. And I've never,
And to change them
Yeah,
again,
like,
right, yeah. Well,
they're
that's
good,
the
like, I'm
thing that
done.
maintenance is
Like, I
less,
don't-
yeah, I would think.
yeah.
so I don't know what other maintenance there is once you have an LED streetlight, but. I mean, the other benefit, of course, is then we can choose the color temperature of the bulbs and like how they look, like. I've seen a lot of really bad streetlights and
And
they're,
then,
you know, they hurt my eyes and they just look bad.
right. And that might be especially beneficial for Monona Drive where we have more decorative like fixtures. So I think it just might give us a little more flexibility in finding LED alternatives for those streetlights. Instead of having to like go based on only what MG&E has access to or is willing to install.
I just have a couple of comments from my perspective. I kind of like the idea of making the Public Works Garage kind of a pet project because it could be sort of a complete package of things that we could really, I think, more heavily influence than, for example, the public safety building. I think we can certainly make recommendations to the team and the public safety department and the council, mayor, et cetera, about ways in which they could pursue more sustainable or eco-friendly choices in their design. But it's kind of exciting to me to think of the Public Works Garage, which I feel is a much neglected building in the city and kind of one that people don't know about, and have sort of a greater influence and more of a stamp on that building specifically. There are lots of different projects within, contained within that you mentioned, with the chargers, the battery storage, the solar. And that personally really piques my interest as something that I personally think would be a great thing to prioritize for us and really make our own project. The second thing I would say, just very briefly, is that to me, it seems like a pretty easy thing to do that would be, again, very easily publicized to the city and would have a long lasting impact to do the remaining LEDs on Monona Drive, for example. So I think that those seem like achievable and sort of, long-term impactful projects that the Sustainability Committee could really take, a great amount of ownership in accomplishing.
Yeah, Teresa, go ahead, Teresa.
Yeah, I was kind of disappointed to learn that the grant does not apply to streetlights, but
Yeah.
are there any funding sources to get that done? I mean, or is it just in, what is it, does it make sense? Does it make sense to go out looking for other funding sources?
I'm sure there is some focus on energy, like incentives that we would be eligible for that, but that's not a grant specifically.
Right.
Yeah, nothing's coming to mind, but I could certainly do some research. I think it wouldn't hurt to at least see what our options are. I don't have an estimate of like how much it would cost to do that streetlight project, like just those last streetlights on Monona Drive. So it's certainly something. I can talk about.
Yeah, the last bullet point said, maybe something's going to be in the Build Back Better, maybe something will be in a different, federal infrastructure bill. Yeah. Molly, do you know what's the latest on the public safety building in terms of like groundbreaking and things like that? No.
Not exactly. I think the timeline that they from engineering to completion, I think the estimate is 2 to 3 years.
Um,
We did, at the most recent meeting, authorize some additional like feasibility studies, just to take a look at our proposed site and just see whether it would be suitable and, work for the reconstruction or rehabilitation of, the current public safety building facility. But we didn't really talk specific timelines.
yeah,
I'm not sure how closely we will adhere to that, but we've been really pushing it hard. And I think, just talking about it publicly for such a long time, that I would anticipate within 2 to 3 years, engineering to completion.
yeah,
The community center is a different story. And is also something that I wish we could do kind of simultaneously, since ultimately it'll be sort of a shared campus space. In the same way that it is now, but I think with maybe more equal, just more equal attention and so
Campus.
long story long, 2 to 3 years. Let's go with that.
yeah. So 2 to 3 years to get it built? No. Are you talking about
Like done,
until?
like in 2 to 3 years, it will be done is I think the estimated timeline.
Got it.
Given the cost, the anticipated cost, I am guessing that there will be a referendum for this.
Yeah.
But I don't know on which ballot
Yeah.
that would be. So not very helpful. I apologize. We were kind of stalled for a bit on it, and then just recently, this week, revived conversations about it.
Yeah.
So. A question about, so we talked about the possibility with the Public Works Department of replacing it with our existing like solar panels that we currently own. Did you mention that, Elisa? And then I'm wondering, so we also talked about, you said, and then, subsequently we'll need to replace the solar panels on all of these other facilities within, a certain amount of time. Does it, with those, would we have to make a new contract or get new panels, or would it be the same thing where we would have an existing sort of cache of these panels to do all of the buildings, or would it make sense to kind of bundle as one big contract with everything? Or can you tell me more about what that would look like, or how that works?
Yeah, so I think if we do them one at a time, right? We're just taking off the, like if we just do the Public Works garage ones, I believe that requires like taking, I apologize if this is not correct. I'm trying to remember like the details of this meeting. But essentially, if we take off those solar panels from the Public
rented
Works
ones?
garage,
The rented ones?
yes, then they would be like taken out of the existing contract that we have. And so then if we wanted to put new ones on, I think they would have to be ones that would have to be then a separate contract, or we'd have to work something out specifically with Legacy Solar Co-op. Ken,
This
do you
is
remember
actually a question that I had for Brad when we met, and that regards sort of like the severability of our existing contract. Right now, all the facilities are owned by, in this case, Legacy Solar Co-op, who basically operates the systems and then sells the electricity to the city. So the question becomes, when we have a facility that is going to get a new roof, those panels will have to come off. And at that point, do we take all of the panels off all the facilities in the city, or do we just remove them off of that one roof and replace that roof and deal with that building, and then deal with the other ones as those roofs require maintenance? So the catch has to do with the who shoulders the cost for the system removal. If the contract comes to an end and the contract is terminated, then it's Legacy Solar's property, and they pay for the removal of that property from the building and, dispose of that however they want to. And then the city is free and clear to do whatever else they want. if we attack each building individually, one at a time, then the city shoulders the burden of removing that system off of the property. And we can then choose to also shoulder the burden of putting it back on the property if we want to resume the contract as is. Or we can remove it, give the property back to Legacy Solar and they retain ownership of it. And then our building has a clear new roof for us to do whatever we want with. So it just kind of depends on if the city is really in a position where we want to attack all those buildings and pursue new solar on all of them, in which case then all of the removal costs are shouldered by Legacy Solar Co-op and we end the contract. Or if we do it piecemeal, which you can do, but then you're faced with the city covering the cost of removing each of those systems one at a time.
Well, and it's interesting because I see some benefit to doing it piecemeal, because then you're not constantly replacing everything on the same schedule every X number of years, right? But I think it also, it's also sort of like, if you do it all at the same time, the technology is all the same, the quality is all the same. You're not having to kind of boost one building up, or do, some sort of temporary fixes to kind of keep it going while the rest are flourishing. I don't know. I guess I really don't know enough about solar, despite our conversations about, what it costs, what the benefits are on this sort of scale amongst many facilities.
There's big economies of scale to bundle facilities together and do a single contractor. You'll get way better pricing. Because for a contract job where they get to do, 500 or 750 kilowatts versus 5 jobs where they get to do 100 kilowatts, it's way more advantageous for them to bid on that large job, and you'll get much more competitive pricing. But the challenge is, can the city really have all of their facilities ready to go at the same time, all with new roofs ready to host solar? And I don't really know that that's going to happen, that all of these buildings are ready to be bid out on the same timeline. That's a pretty tall order.
The other thing I was wondering about, is there any change in the efficiencies of solar over time too? I mean, that's pretty, where it's at, it's pretty much where it's going to be, or?
Yeah, there are changes, but that's kind of incremental. And there's also cost reductions over time too, but that's also kind of incremental. But I think the big challenge is, how do you conduct, what is essentially 4 construction projects at the same time on 4 different buildings? That's really hard to do. If you can pull it off, you get tremendous savings, but I just don't know that it's real practical,
When does our contract end with the solar company?
So because Legacy Solar Co-op just bought it, I think we're going year to year with it. So it's not like, oh, we have to wait until, 2025 till our contract is over. Like, there's a little more wiggle room in being able to decide more quickly when we want to end that contract.
Do we all agree that we're not gonna use them in the future, or might we still?
I think I'm not sure exactly what the decision, why the decision was made to do year to year. I think it's partially because, actually, I'm not totally sure why that decision was made. I think it's probably in part because the panels were put up in 2012, 2013. So it gives us a little more flexibility if we do decide that we want to replace them and do something different.
Just seems like we should
Yeah.
own our own solar panels to me. Maybe I'm wrong. I haven't really heard of people doing this a lot.
It's not an uncommon, situation for schools and municipalities, because there is a big upfront cost associated with installing and owning a system. And especially when you guys put that in 2012, it was way more expensive back then. So for a lot of cities and school districts that couldn't afford to, outright purchase a system and put it on their roof, it was done through a third party like this that provided the upfront cost And then that also allowed them to take advantage of the federal investment tax credit, which at the time was a 30% tax credit, which the city can't qualify for a tax credit. So it's an incentive payment that otherwise wouldn't be available. And by using a third party tax sponsor, you cut the cost of the system by a third. That's pretty substantial. But that tax sponsor has to own it for at least 6 years. And sometimes owns it for as long as 7 or 10 years, depending on the contract structure. So now that your tax investor has been bought out, there's no longer a need to have that fixed window of time. So it kind of makes sense that the contract would revert to year after that. But I do agree with you. If the city can own the panels outright, you definitely save more money that way. It's just a matter of figuring out how to finance the outright purchase of a system, either through bonding or borrowing or grants or how you make it happen. That's a lot easier now than it was in 2012 when solar was, 5 times more expensive than it is today.
Should we pretend that there's a grant that's about to, like, should we have a grant ready to go kind of, or something, just like, even if it's just a template or a boilerplate kind of thing, just so that, I don't know, so we can kick butt when a grant comes our way and like, we don't have to freak out.
Well, the challenge with these OEI grants is we don't really know how many more rounds there will be in the future. That this is the third round that is leftover stimulus funding 2000, right? Like sooner or later they got to spend that money out. It's possible with this this pending reconciliation bill in the Congress that they may allocate more money for this kind of purposes, and it's possible that they might decide to spend that the same way through the states, and that the Public Service Commission will just keep this kind of grant platform going for another 4 years or whatever, at least through the Biden administration. But I don't really know. We don't really know if that'll pass, if the money will still be in there, and if it'll be executed in the same way. So I'd hate to say we should spend time now writing a proposal for a request for proposals that might not ever materialize. That it seems like we got a lot of other places we could spend our time, rather than trying to write a proposal for something that might not happen for another year or two, and it may not happen at all.
I really appreciate having this document and having the dates, of the new roof over here, the new roof over there. I mean, that's really, really helpful to have that all laid out. So thanks you guys for getting together and just organizing that information.
Yeah.
Is there any idea, like this last point, the renewable energy rider, is there any, I don't know, is it common to say that we will only ever be able to produce half of the energy we need with solar? Or, I mean, what's like logically what we could ever get out of solar on all the rooftops of these buildings? Are we always going to have a pretty significant, rider or a rec or something like
Yeah,
that?
that's my understanding, because we don't have our own, like, we only have so much rooftop space that's owned by the city. And because we don't have like a big open field somewhere where we could put up our
Right.
own solar array, we're gonna need, like, if we want to purchase more solar, it will likely have to be through a rider.
I mean, with the new building that's being constructed, with the new public safety building, and we could go lead, whatever, how high we want, and we could just make it a low energy user from the get-go, right? And then the solar is going to have a greater percentage of your overall, consumption. I get that. Was there any conversation about just energy efficiency projects and just reducing consumption at any of our buildings, or was that?
That wasn't as much part of our discussion. I think, I think the only new piece of information is that like, we've talked a little bit about the community center in the past, and
Right.
we actually have converted most of the lights in there to LEDs, minus some of those like big decorative
Yeah.
lighting pieces in like that main meeting area, the bigger room. So that's something, but otherwise, we didn't really talk about a ton of energy efficiency stuff outside of this like new siding and roof for the public works garage.
I feel like, I should probably just dig up my notes, but I just feel like a lot of that work has been done, that we have been looking at energy efficiency, and we have done some retro commissioning and, some performance auditing and things like that. I just want to make sure that we've checked that box first before, or that we don't leave that out of our plan, I guess.
Right. Yeah, I agree. It probably makes sense to know that we've like checked off all that low hanging fruit
Yeah.
before, or at least while we're thinking about doing some of these bigger projects. I
So in
almost
terms
like-
of this,
Go ahead.
so in terms of this document, Elisa, are you asking us for our preferences, like Molly let us know her preference for public works? Or is there any reason why all of the above could not eventually happen, as long as it was just plotted out on a timeline, or with
Yeah,
the
so
appropriate,
yeah, I think from what I heard Nancy say, like, maybe we do, like, we've talked a little bit about making an energy roadmap. Maybe
Right.
all of like plotting out the timelines for all of these projects, that
Right.
becomes the energy roadmap. I do think it's
Right.
helpful to think about like, what is the thing we should tackle first?
Absolutely.
But yeah, I feel like these are things that could all
Yeah.
happen, maybe not all right away, but yeah, over the next
Yeah.
however many years.
I mean, I'm thinking, the roof replacement sort of determines which one you do first, but also just the energy efficiency can happen at any time. And I think we know who our biggest offenders are, that, the community center is just like, the doors might as well just be open all the time on that building, right? I mean,
Yeah.
gotta be something that can be done. It's not going to be replaced for another 8-9 years, right? So,
Right, I think if we wanted to pursue, or go
or
ahead,
Molly thinks
yeah,
differently.
Molly.
We are supposed to be saying 5 to 8 years.
Okay,
We're not allowed to say a decade anymore. So
got it.
shorter than that timeline is
5 to 8 years.
preferred
Okay.
language, verbiage.
So if you, I mean, even just going through that thing with a caulk gun and just sealing up the windows, I mean.
Put the
you know.
saran wrap, tape saran
Yeah,
wrap.
I mean,
around
I
it.
don't know, like, is it that bad? I
Easy
mean, Brad
project.
jokes about it,
Yeah,
but I don't know.
yeah,
I think this is great. I think the roadmap plus prioritization is great. I think this all makes perfect sense. And it seems like there are some, just given the conversation that we've had tonight, just some natural timelines already in place, that we've discussed. So I think the next step would be plotting those out. And, I mean, again, with the idea in mind that there are certain things that may not have a firm timeline that we want to push up, further, closer, nearer to now. It's never too late for now, is my point.
Right.
Mm.
And to Chris's earlier comment about, can we just like start writing a generic grant and just sort of have it like, started at least so that we're ready? I mean, and Ken, you'll know more about this for sure, but I get the impression that the OEI grant is particularly a tight turnaround, like just a couple months, whereas most grants aren't that they aren't on that demanding of a schedule, or am I mistaken on that?
Well, I would say, if we're talking about like a Department of Energy grant, you usually have anywhere from 4 to 6 months from
Okay,
a
yeah,
funding announcement to when it's due. Organizations like the National Science Foundation, like they issue the solicitation a year ahead of time.
okay,
Um,
yeah,
you don't see many municipalities apply for NSF grants, but you do see them apply for DOE grants for sure.
Okay.
And then, if you're talking about, general sort of like philanthropic foundations, it's all over the map,
yeah,
and some of them don't even have funding announcements. They just have funds that are available if you choose to apply for them, and it's just an open application sort of thing.
Yeah.
The challenge there is finding the right funding source to match your project,
yeah,
Teresa, I just want to amplify what you said about having I think if we can have an existing document that could be sort of a flexible grant application that has all of the components filled in that we know concretely and firmly that probably will not change. And then, be able to kind of use that and apply that to future opportunities. I think that's a really smart idea.
but is that even possible? I don't know if that's possible. I mean, I don't have a tremendous amount of
Generic.
grant experience, but they're all
Dan,
pretty unique, aren't
my
they?
partner Dan has a lot of grant writing experience, so I could
Okay.
ask him too, or even just say like,
Yeah,
is there a place that you go that has sort of a generic outline that we could just sort of pre-populate and then build upon in the case that we need to apply to multiple different organizations or sources or whatever. But I think that would be smart to have that in our back pocket, because I think, I don't know, just from work on various committees, I feel like it always comes down to like a last minute thing and then it's a crunch. And I just think it's can be a pretty complicated and time consuming process. So if we can take some of the, the legwork out of that, I think that would be really smart. So,
well, we might just want to get copies of past grants from all these places that we know of. I mean, it would just be a matter of like looking up last year's grant package. What were the questions they asked, but
And those are available. And I know especially in their like document that lists all of the grant recipients for their 2018 round of funding, I know they have like links to the specific application documents. Those
Yeah.
might also be available for the last year of funding, but I don't know exactly where they are. So we certainly could go through and see what kind of questions they asked. And for projects that were like solar projects or battery storage projects, we could go through and see sort of what those applications look like to get a sense of what kind of information we're going to need to pull together for this.
and I believe you always need standard information, like a description of what, your organization or,
Yeah.
past project, I think there will be easily,
Yeah.
stuff that you could
History,
just
yeah.
keep in a Word document that's already prepared that you could just copy paste and pull over. That's a redundant piece of most applications. Again, I do not write grants, but I feel like this is true. So,
Yeah, yeah.
any other, do we want to sort of make an action, propose any action items out of this discussion? Do we want to keep the conversation going? Does anyone have any other feedback?
I think my only thought on action would be just to like plot this out, like in a chronological order. And
I
like
agree.
figure out where the dependencies are and what has to happen before, and just. Yeah,
I think
Um,
drawing up some kind of a timeline for the various projects would be a good thing to have. I mean, that would be a nice figure to include in a grant proposal if we ever submit one. So
right.
I'm
that
happy
is a
to,
good thought.
yeah, I'm happy to plot these out on a timeline.
great. And then, sorry, Elisa.
Good.
And then is it too much to ask of your time about the past grant? I mean, if that's something where, like, for example, if you have access to that and I'm able to look at it, I could certainly try to help with parsing some things out, or I just don't know what is appropriate to ask you to do as, action items related to that, the grant piece, the grant preparation
Yeah.
piece.
I'm happy to send out the PDF document that they have of their previous grant recipients so that people can look through
Great,
those for projects that are similar to what we might want to do.
awesome. And then we can also see kind of the format and what to anticipate in the future, and we can all
Yeah.
sort of provide feedback if we have it. Awesome. Thank you.
To an earlier point about, plotting these out on a timeline and the way it all kind of works with grants, and this is just my experience with the high school project, I think it was really beneficial for us to demonstrate that we had sort of like a comprehensive district-wide perspective. This high school building fits alongside all these other buildings, and that over the course of the next, X number of years gets us to a certain energy efficiency or a certain, clean energy point. And so I guess all I'm trying to say is just sort of piecing together what everybody's saying. It just sort of all fits together, that it would prepare us even further for the grant applications to come, that we get that all together in a nice story.
Yeah, I think we have the beginnings of that, right?
Yeah.
Like the slipstream report and then some of our like dashboards. I think we have some of the data that shows where we are now. And then if we wanted to build that out, we could do some like projecting, here's how much we expect to reduce, how much energy we're actually using. And then throw in some estimates about, how much, like what percentage each project would get us closer to our like 100% clean energy goal.
Another idea or question is, with the high school, again, the math was so favorable that we probably would have gone forward even if we didn't, we would have gone forward even if we didn't get the grant. Is there any, would the city be able to say that sort of thing? I mean, is there any building within our portfolio that is just such an energy hog, and a panel, an array on the roof would cut the consumption by such a great, I just wonder, do we have to wait until we have a grant to apply for? It's of course a great thing to do. I'm not saying we shouldn't do it, but
I think we're in a little bit different situation than we were with the school district, Teresa, because the school district was faced with buildings with empty roofs, right? Whereas here we have
that's
buildings
true.
that already have solar on top of the roof.
That's true.
We're talking about removing one solar system to replace it with another one. So,
Good point.
I actually
Good
think, if we're thinking about doing that, what we also need to do in addition to this timeline of just looking when that roof space is becoming available, is
Yep, you're
is
right.
to document really well what the existing systems are producing right now, how much energy they produced over their lifetime and how much they produced in the last year. So we know what the potential gains would be if we took them off and added another system, right?
Right.
Because it's not like the systems that are up there don't work. They do. It's just that a new system would make more energy than the current one does. So then you have to ask the question, well, is it worthwhile spending taxpayer dollars to take one solar PV system down and replace it with a newer one that would give us a little bit extra energy? Or are we better off spending that money someplace else, like on the community center building, right? Like
Right.
doing weatherization projects and insulation and things like that. So I think that's the other component that we probably need to do as a first step, is documenting the existing solar systems that are on the roofs really well, so that we know how well they're actually performing. How well are they performing now compared to their first year of operation? How much have they degraded? Because they've been up there for 10 years and solar panels performance does slowly decline over time. So how are they doing? Are they meeting the manufacturer's expectations? Are they doing better than the manufacturer's predictions were? I don't know the answer to that, but that would be good to document.
I have a feeling that they are not producing. They're performing below expectation, I think we could say, on some of them.
I just haven't looked at it in that way.
Yeah.
So I can definitely, I'm trying to pull some of that together and just see what the numbers are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I I would say, Teresa, I think the problem with the buildings that we would really want to hone in on that are energy suckers already are in the process of going to be, like it's
Yeah.
on the way.
Yeah.
The one that I think kind of is the outlier of that is a library, which I think is like constantly needing stuff, but we have no, to my knowledge, no big plans for a major
Replace that
renovation. So I
building,
think
right,
that would be like
right.
the Band-Aid building, right?
Okay.
Because I foresee that, not necessarily with solar, but like, things that Ken was mentioning, I think Ken or Chris, about, what else could you do temporarily with,
Yeah.
energy consumption or reduction of, loss of energy through, again, saran wrapping the windows. I'll just say it again. I think it's a funny joke. Or not a joke or a serious remark. But yeah,
Mine
so
are
I
wrapped
think
right
that's kind
now.
of- What'd you say?
Mine are wrapped right now, so.
See, there you have it. It's the thing. We do it.
Yep.
I do the
So yeah,
clapping.
so
I do
that's the only
clapping.
thing that I think is like the problem is like, yes, I would love to do something like that for the community center, which is like the hugest, as you already said, and the public safety department, but I just don't know how much you put into, and we've already
Dying
put some money into just some basic, like, so it doesn't fall down, community center, improvements, like, can we keep the stairs from collapsing? Let's do that. So I think that's what makes it tricky, this is that's absolutely true, by the way. What I've just said is 100% just a real thing.
Oh, boy. Okay.
Yeah.
That's
So
funny.
anyway, but I like the idea, but I think that's where we get into muddy water, is just with this timeline that we have potentially of redoing the two biggest users, energy consumers of our facility array. So, okay, are people good with going on to the next series of agenda items?
Yeah. Thank you. For the
Okay,
people who worked on this, Ken, Lisa, Nancy.
you bet. All right, new bit. Okay, on to item 7, the DEI discussion items. Projects, programs, policies, or budget considerations for council advisement. I have a question on this one, or I guess a kind of a comment, but the Transit Commission is currently in discussion with Madison Metro about potential collaboration. And one of the things that we need to decide, if that happens, is what, would be the most efficient and in the sense of energy efficiency, but also in getting people to and from where they need to go in and out of Monona route around the city. I'm wondering if that's an area where sustainability committee could be helpful in, plotting a map or kind of getting some ideas to share with the commission, and that, then also Madison Metro about what might be an appropriate loop through town. And there's no guarantee that this is going to happen. This is just all in very early stages. But I just figured I'd kick that to the team and see what you thought about ways that we could potentially be involved in sort of maximizing the efficiency and, within a set footprint that needs to be, a 30-minute loop through the city. So just something to think about. And then if anyone has any ideas about how we could make a positive contribution to that, or work on the mapping, or I don't know. Let the brains in the room have the floor. You know what I mean? I welcome your feedback and ideas.
Yeah. I have nothing to contribute to that brain bank. No, on that topic. No.
All right, well, then just in the meantime, you can just feel like kind of excited about the potential of
Here you go.
better
Yeah.
busing in our city. All right.
I think as part of the university year, like series of projects that happened in 2016, I know there was something related to like, I don't remember if it was transit or it was only like pedestrian and bike improvements, but I can certainly go back, look through those quickly and see if there's anything in there. Otherwise, I don't really know.
No problem. And like, obviously
I
the,
know public transit, but I'm not a transit planner.
No problem. That would be great if there's any like
Yeah.
past, and we don't have to, that's just something that I was just in that meeting last night and I just was sort of thinking about that component of it. If we are in charge as a transit commission to create that route, what kind of vectors would be the most important to take into consideration? So yes, Chris in the back.
I have never taken the Monona transit thing, but.
Monona Express, the Monona
sorry,
Express.
That, but the only times I've wished I could use it are when I decide it would be best for me to Uber downtown, because I don't want to deal with parking downtown. Like like on a Friday or Saturday night, I wish there was a Monona Express going down to State Street or the square like every half hour between 5 PM and midnight or something.
Like a drunk bus.
Like a drunk, I don't
I know, I was gonna like
drink,
make
but
a,
I still.
I think that's what Chris is talking about.
So if that existed, I would use it a lot.
I think we're talking about, I think part of the collaboration, the merger would include weekend and evening routes, a greater variety of options.
I mean, I don't want to sound, it's right now, it seems like it's kind of for elderly people or people that can't drive. I don't know, but there's a potential for many more people to use it if it were helpful to more people.
I think it's for, I mean, just I took it years ago when my car was in the shop. It was ideal. It took me right downtown. I work downtown. If you work downtown or if you work at the university and you live in Monona, it's brilliant. It's absolutely wonderful. If you need a ride to some other place, not as much. And I don't know if now is the time to bring this up, Molly. I should just talk to you maybe independently, but I have a neighbor who did bring up something about transportation. Is there an opportunity to, let's just talk about it.
Okay.
Another
Give
meeting.
me a call anytime.
Yeah, okay.
We'll walk the dogs. Okay, if there's not like a clear objective as far as helping with the route planning, then we can move on to suggestions from others in the DEI category. Or updates.
There must have been some initial work done on who are the potential riders, like you're saying, there's a group there, but I think some of that initial work was done, but I don't know, from my own perspective, just people I've encountered in work sites and so on, the main thing seems to be how to get you, your kids, and yourself to work. And that always doesn't work very efficiently on a bus system. And I don't know how to make, our community is really structured in a very awkward way for picking up people, pretty locally. You have to stay pretty much on the main streets, and getting people to those bus stops is difficult. So I don't know, just the
Well,
geography.
more big and better things to come in theory. So just hold your thoughts and wait for it. But I think we're gonna get, the ball rolling in January. So
Some of the old.
the only other thing I would mention is for everybody's reference, the Nehemiah Black History for a New Day course is now open for registration. It's their spring course. It's, I believe, a 9-week commitment, 1 evening per week for several hours. And there are different ways you can participate as far as, being an individual looped into a group with others that you don't know, having a group that you put together that works together to take the course. I haven't yet taken it. I can't wait to have the time to do it. I've been looking forward to it for a long time, but I know many on the Monona staff and in city leadership have taken it. People I know personally just would highly recommend. And that's just, not related to anything specific other than great way to kind of just learn about what you don't know. So if there aren't any other DEI, I'll buzz on down to the next.
I'll just say one thing, go to the Monona ARC website, and there's a couple new opportunities coming up next calendar year if you're interested in signing up.
Great, thanks, Teresa. Okay, all right. Next, important updates from committee members or items to consider for future agendas. Seems like we already have some, pretty hefty action items to discuss next time. Does anyone else have any other suggestions?
Well, I just have one request. Last month, you asked me to follow up with some publicity and ideas for water conservation. And unfortunately, at the very end of the meeting, everybody threw in there who to contact and where to get information, and it was all, I didn't get any of it. So if any of you have leads for that and want to just email me with that lead and where the information is or who I should talk to, that would be very helpful in terms of.
And Sue, that was the education on that Water Sense software, right? Is that what we're
Right,
talking
we're
about?
focusing
Yeah.
initially, I think the plan was to do that initially and then build it into a project or thing later if that seemed appropriate, but we're still debating that at the library and all sorts of things. So, yeah, it's a great
Well,
first step anyway, regardless.
I'll just say it now. My suggestion was to get in touch with the vendor, the creator of the software that the city bought it from, and see if they have any training documentation at the already assembled, users guides, handouts, cheat
Sure,
sheets,
yeah.
whatever. Don't reinvent the wheel.
Yeah,
And
well,
Sue, you could probably contact Brian Gatto or Mark Hotaker for that information. Do you have their information or would you like me to send you their email addresses?
I don't have any of their information.
I'll send that to you, no problem.
Okay. Thank you.
You got it. The last as far as future agenda, I think something that would be nice for us to be thinking about is how to be present in the city's e-newsletter each month. And now we're getting into winter. I think there are lots of things that we could do, just like little snippets with graphics or something that's like, don't forget to saran wrap your windows, or don't forget to, unplug your appliances if you're going out of town for an extended period of time, or, just some little like conservation sustainability tips. I think that'd be a fun thing that we could sort of update relatively regularly without a lot of fanfare from different individuals on this committee to be put in the newsletter. So just an idea. And maybe if people can bring ideas or something to share at the next meeting, that could go in next month's newsletter potentially.
I have an idea for the newsletter. As a realtor, I go into a lot of houses. I see a lot of people that have like the old school thermostats, never changed them, the old Honeywell circle thing. If I'm not mistaken, MG&E seems to always have some sort of program where you can upgrade. And they subsidize it somewhat. I feel like sometimes maybe they even offer one for free, or I don't know, but you know what I'm talking about. So
Yeah.
like perhaps we could mention something about that program.
Focus on
Once-
energy. Yeah,
Yeah.
Chris,
I would
Focus on
love to
Energy has
assign
a,
you
incentive
that,
program.
action
I'll do
item.
it. I'll
Chris
do
is
it.
gonna do it. Great. Sorry, Ken, you were talking, but then I was talking and I just
Yeah,
didn't
sorry.
stop.
I was just saying, Focus on Energy has an incentive program that you can get a
Yep.
cash credit if you install a Nest thermostat. There's a few other models you can install too of smart thermostats. If you
Yep.
take a look at the Focus page, that might just be the link to send people to.
I
Yeah.
love the Nest thermostat, but usually it's the people that have the old original Honeywell thermostat are like also, they're not gonna want a Wi-Fi, $300 Wi-Fi
Right.
thermostat. I mean, but if it could just be like a digital thermostat that like can have a program, that would save money. And they're cheap. Maybe if we could figure out, well, I'll do my research.
Yeah,
Great.
take a look at the.
Thanks so
Focus
much. I think
page.
that would
They've
be
got a list
awesome.
Of a bunch of different ones. I don't know what the low tech ones might look like on that page, but
Right.
I just think that'd be a great way to remind people that we're here and we're just thinking about ways to connect with the community and give ideas about how to be responsible as an individual in our community. So
Totally.
awesome.
And
All
then
right.
assumption-
We could also build just
Future-
like a little repertoire of things that could be seasonally
You bet.
Yeah.
sent out to people.
Great. Good thinking.
So Molly, if
Great.
this is an appropriate time, I had some things that I wanted to kind of just brainstorm with folks a little bit that we might want to think about in the future.
You bet.
I know at one of our last meetings, the topic of our urban trees came up, and people kind of expressed that there was kind of burnout on that topic from past work done by the committee. Like since we met last time, I saw two big headlines that the city of Chicago was getting like lots of press for a pledge to plant 75,000 trees and got a bunch of grant funding for it. And then Albuquerque followed up with 100,000 trees that they committed to plant in Albuquerque. So, like this is a real tangible way to reduce, CO2 in our atmosphere and have an impact on climate. And I know the committee has a forestry fund because I've contributed to it. Our goal was to plant 50 trees. So I think we could do a little bit better than that. We're not going to do 75,000. We're not the size of Chicago, but if we aim to plant, if we did like what Albuquerque did, they were planting one tree for every 5 residents. For comparison, that would be like 1,600 trees for us. And I started looking at it a little bit, and when the city did the forestry inventory, they found we had 150 ash trees that were already diseased and dying, and another 500 that were expected to die in the next few years. So like our 50 tree goal is an order of magnitude insufficient, even to address the ash trees that we know are going to die, much less to, increase our tree canopy or deal with any other trees that might suffer storm damage or have to be removed because they're, diseased or, structurally unsound. So, it just seemed to me like that's an area that I don't think we should give up on. And I think there's some.
Oh, Ken, we lost you.
One would increase our goal, and the other a lot easier to control. A tree fund existed if I hadn't have talked to Nancy, because like I've never seen it advertised anywhere. And then when I did go to contribute, like first you go to the forestry page for the website, and then it takes you to a thing on the tree program. Then you download the PDF that describes the tree donation policy. And if you read to the end of that 2-page document, then there's an email that you send to the city administrator to find out how to donate. So I send that to Brian, then he responds back to me with the information about how to contribute a check. Then I write a check and then I drop it in the mail. I mean, that was like 30 days that passed from when I talked to Nancy to made it go. Like anybody that does donations will tell you that's not the way to get somebody's money, right? The way to do it is like we do on the San Damiano page. You go there, the very first thing you see is a picture of the property with a big blue box that says donate today.
Donate.
And you
Yep.
click on it and it immediately takes your credit card information and you're done in 5 minutes, right?
Yep.
Like it shouldn't be that hard for me to give money to the city,
Right.
Yeah, I mean, my other job is working for a nonprofit that primarily does fundraising, so I totally understand where you're coming from. I think we definitely could do a better job of getting information out about the forestry fund and like how to donate and simplifying that. I think in terms of like making it easier for people to make a credit card donation, that might be a little harder. It just might require more like back end work on the city's website, and I don't totally know what the options are there, if there's capabilities for that, but I agree that like first step definitely is just like clarifying the information and making it more easily accessible. So.
Ken, if you don't mind, I think what would be really helpful is if you wouldn't mind exploring the website and kind of giving some information to us about ways that you think that we could streamline that information or organize it in a more appropriate way. And on the other end, I would be happy to connect with our city administrator about potential ways to do an online donation option. But I think it seems to me the first step is making sure that the information is easily accessible and navigable by site visitors. So as someone with recent experience, that would be a great, if that's something that you could do, I think that'd be a great thing to bring back in January. In the meantime, we can talk about other marketing or, improvements to this process and to the donation.
So
I-
Ken sort of took the words out of my mouth. very funny. I was just about to say this exact same thing, make a comment about trees. Last year, and I just hope that this body doesn't lose its appetite to give it another go on that event that Nancy and I and others had planned around Arbor Day, and just to get a massive awareness and education campaign about planting trees and how to plant them. We were gonna have a great big event because of, like what Ken was saying, there's over 600 trees that we're losing. Number two, a friend of mine here in town ran into him when I was walking my dog. And he said, I want to talk to you about an idea I have. And he goes, you know how there's those t-shirts that have the word Monona with the bicycle tires in the logo. And we had the year of the bike. Why not make 2022 the year of the tree? And educate the people in our community that we're losing almost 700 trees or whatever the number is. And really do like a big push to plant trees. He goes, let's plant 1,000 trees. Or I don't know what his number was, but when you talk about Albuquerque, I mean, we can do 1,000, right? I mean, let's just, and go big. I mean, just don't be like 50. No, that doesn't get anyone's attention, doesn't spark any excitement, doesn't spark any, interest. Just 1,000 trees. Let's do it. You can get like little baby trees for like $1. You can get, they don't have to be big, full, mature trees, but we could do it.
I think another possibility for getting free trees would be
Yeah.
to create a mechanism by which homeowners that have trees growing on their property can donate them to be relocated to the city property. There's all kinds of tree species that regenerate naturally in our yards, right? There's
Right.
oaks, there's maples, there's walnuts, there's hickories, and
No walnuts. No walnuts.
because they don't have any place to go with saplings that grow next to their house or in their driveway, and they just rip them out. But if there was a way to say, I've got a hickory tree growing next to my driveway that I want to remove, can I donate it to the city? And the city can designate a spot with some GPS coordinates and get a hole prepped for it. Then that tree doesn't get wasted and it's free nursery stock. It's actually better than nursery stock because it's got naturally regenerating roots, not roots that have been balled and burlapped and put in a container. So it's a way more structurally sound tree if you dig it up out of a naturally grown seedling out of somebody's yard and just pretty where it can be taken care of. Those trees cost nothing. It's just labor, and the homeowner would probably donate the labor of digging it up just because they want to get rid of the tree anyways, right?
Yeah.
I
It
think all
requires
of that
a lot of
is-
outreach.
Yeah, I think it, from like the city and staff perspective, it just requires figuring out what department does that, right? I think things are already kind of split between public works versus parks. And deciding or finding out if staff have time to take those things on. Like there's an administrative component to it, right? Communicating with homeowners about what they want to do and then being able to then communicate with like the staff who are actually going to go out and do that, dig up the tree or plant these trees. And this is a consistent thing, like we're limited on staff time. So
Well, maybe we could partner with schools and churches and other things too. People that, and especially if we're talking smaller trees, a lot of people can. I mean, it's digging a hole and putting it in, I mean, there's a little more to it, but I mean,
Right.
it's not anything that we couldn't have sort of information about and learn how to do this.
sure, yeah.
I can
I-
tell you guys, when I taught high school in Menominee Falls, I taught there for 4 years and I advised the Student Arbor Club. And in 4 years, they planted 80 trees. And it was all just volunteer labor, and donated tree stock. I mean, they bought some trees from nurseries, but they were all donated to the school. And it was all students and their families that planted them. So, if a single high school can plant 80 trees, I'm sure our sustainability committee can have a goal bigger than 50, right?
Sure. Yeah, and if we were to do it, I don't know, I guess I'm just thinking that like doing like one-off planting, obviously, like Public Works and Parks will plant a certain number of trees every year because that's just part of what they do. If we want to like hit a goal, and I can try and find out like how many trees that is every year that are just kind of already getting planted. It's
Sorry.
like reaching an additional goal, you know, if we wanted to organize a tree planting event where people can volunteer to come and do the labor, right, of like, at least like, you know, digging the holes, planting the trees, that could certainly help. I just want to be like realistic in how much additional staff time there is.
You know, I think
that's the limit.
part of what you want to do too is beyond just planting trees on city property, you want to encourage private citizens to plant trees on their own personal property, right?
Right.
So the way you do that is by first providing a platform that young kids can learn how to plant a tree. And if they plant a tree at the city park or on a school, then the next thing they want to do is plant one in their yard that they can watch grow.
Right.
Right? So if it was possible for, you know, for an Earth Day or an Arbor Day event, say for a family to buy a permit to plant a
Yep.
tree at the city park, and then to go there and they do the labor, they dig the hole and they plant the tree there. The city selects the species and designates the spot where it goes so that we just don't have random trees being slapped in the middle of a soccer field or something like that. But if there was a way to buy a permit and that then a family can go out there with their kids and they can celebrate Earth Day or Arbor Day and plant the tree and get the experience. And that's free volunteer labor from community members, you know. Plus a permit fee that they pay to subsidize the labor being done by the city staff, you know.
That's a fantastic activity for a family to do on Arbor Day. And it could really be marketed through the library to families in town with children.
It's
That's a
also sort of
fantastic
an equity thing, because think about all the families that live in rental housing or in a property
Yep.
that, you know, that they don't,
They don't have a backyard to put a tree in, right?
Right. If-
Mhm.
buy opportunity to them on
Yeah,
that both beautifies the city and it you know connects our citizens to the environment in a way that they wouldn't otherwise have. And once a kid plants a tree, they'll be connected to the community forever. They come back even when they're grown-ups and they might not even live in Monona, but when they visit their parents and they go back and show their kids the tree, right?
yep, yep, yep.
And
And when
so-
it's on public property, it's even more special. You know, it's like, oh, look at this park. That's the tree I planted. Yeah,
Exactly.
that's cool.
And it's also not a high demand thing for people, you know, it's really a limited time frame required and they've
Right,
done something.
Right, it's a
They've
couple
been
hours, right?
engaged and- Yeah,
Ken, before you were a member of this committee, we had talked quite a bit about this idea for memorial or dedication trees, you know, allowing people to plant a tree in a public space and dedicate it to a loved one or a graduate or a birthday or whatever it might be. So just, you know, we've sort of had those conversations with the city and it seems like it's more complicated than we thought it might be. So, yeah.
Yeah, we do have tree dedications at the college.
Yeah,
At least we did for a while. I'm not sure if we still have that program going there, but it's definitely been done before.
yeah, yeah.
You know, I think, you know, for the people that do give to the forestry fund, you know, it'd be nice is when the trees get planted from the forestry fund would just be to have like a little yard sign that says, you know, this tree was planted from the forestry fund on
Exactly.
this day. Here's the species. So when people see that new tree there, they know, oh, there's a forestry fund. Maybe even put a little
Right.
QR code right there so they could scan it with their phone
Right.
and then donate to it or something like that, you know?
Right,
Otherwise, people just walk past the brand new tree and they never think about, you know, where it came from and how it got there.
right. Totally agree.
Okay, I think a great place to start is what we talked about with website organization and making donation to our existing urban forestry fund more accessible. I think all of these IDs are really important. Elisa touched on this a little bit, but there are a lot of internal politics, I would say, about the tree planting event that we proposed. That doesn't preclude us from trying this in the future, but there are just some complicated things with, again, as Elisa mentioned, the split between public works and parks. And then wanting us to do something as our own separate entity just adds sort of another layer to something that is already sort of unnecessarily, I would say, split. So I think we should keep the conversation going. I think we should add it as an agenda item for next time. But I do think a really good and easy way to accomplish, just getting our foot in the door is the website streamlining to make sure that people know how to access it, how we can improve, visibility and accessibility of the information, and then looking into the potential of an easier way to donate to the fund.
Yeah, I think one suggestion would be if it's not possible to donate with a credit card and you do have to mail in a check, just making that information right there available on the website so that you don't have to send an email to the city administrator to ask for instructions about how to donate to the forestry fund. All you
Yeah,
have to do is
totally agree.
make the check out to this place, mail it to this address, like those instructions could be right on the website and
Yeah.
done. I'm sure the city administrator has better things to be doing than to answering
Well-
everybody's emails about how to donate for trees.
Agreed. And I do think there are probably some small organizational changes to the site that are, HR, Leah, she's the multitasker. She's the Renaissance woman, jack of all trades of the city, could easily make, if we have some suggestions to kind of put on her plate for this. So if we could have some eyes on that before the next meeting, that would also be great. And then we can just kind of figure out ways to make it better. Again, more easily accessible and easily navigable by site visitors. And then at our next meeting, we can talk about other ways to sort of market, promote, and do, potentially our own thing with a tree planting event or multiple events or something of that nature. Does that sound good?
Yep, and I also have access to editing the website, so like.
Lisa, yes,
Yeah, and
queen.
honestly, yeah, I mean, all the entire planning department and sustainability pages and occasionally public works are like all things that I do. But like, I will say like, cause I look at the website all the time and I know where all this stuff is, but
Yeah.
it's actually really helpful for me to hear from other people, like when it's hard to navigate, cause I know like there's so much information on there. And it's hard to keep it all organized. So yeah, definitely you can email Leah or I with suggestions to make that easier to navigate, because I know there's a lot on there.
And
You know,
maybe even an apology. It sounds like maybe an apology to Elisa since she's the one that put the information. I'm just joking. Just a joke.
That is website maintenance is a never-ending job, and it's a thankless job because nobody ever sees the work that goes on underneath the hood. That is a task all unto itself. I can appreciate that, having been behind the design and building of several websites, and the bigger they get, the harder it becomes too. So
Yeah.
another thought, sort of related to Teresa's suggestion about the promotion with the t-shirts, absent actually physically planting any trees, if it's too hard to get public works and parks behind that or something like that, we could do a lot just to promote private people to do more and take more interest with the trees on their property. A simple thing might be creating like a tree champions list for the city, and have a way for residents to submit their tree if they think they have a record holder for a given species, and make a list of the five biggest, five biggest sugar maples, five biggest silver maples, and document where those are in the city. That'd be kind of a cool thing to do for Earth Day or Arbor Day, to launch a
I
tree
think so,
champions
too.
list for Monona, and then people take interest in the big trees that are next to them.
Speaking of Earth Day, Chris, are you still interested in that Paddle Monona event? Do you think we should try it for 2022?
Yes,
Ken, this is also before you got on the committee. Chris and Nancy and I were gonna do a Paddle Lake Monona. It was a big an activity to get people more engaged and more in touch with their lake, and to see the city from the lake. and see all the parks that are there that people may not even know exist, and the San Damiano shoreline, and the Wildhaven Park and all the way down. So something to put on or keep it on our radar for next year.
I
For
agree.
sure.
That's a good future agenda item, especially for when Nancy will be here, because I know it's sort of, a little passion project.
Earth thing with paddling,
No.
yeah.
That's a good activity for Earth Day, even in a pandemic, because if you're sitting in a
Yeah.
kayak, you pretty much have to
Right.
be socially distanced, so.
Right. Right, right.
Okay.
And last year we were not vaccinated. This year we are, so it'll be fine.
There you go. Good attitude. I like that. Okay, unless there is any other discussion or future agenda items, I keep thinking there's a person behind Chris, but it's like the dais or whatever they're called. You're fine. He's okay. You have something to say?
We're good.
I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Who first did?
I'll move to adjourn.
Got it. Okay. We've got Chris on one, Sue on second, all in favor?
Hi.
I
Thanks, everybody. See you next month. I'm excited about the things that are to come. So,
Bye, folks.
Thank you, Molly.
Bye.
bye.
Thank you.